This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Well, welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and tonight I'm excited to welcome back to the program Cindy Finch, a seasoned therapist and cancer survivor who has just released a new workbook called Epic Comeback, Reinventing Yourself After Diagnosis, Divorce, or Devastation. Welcome back to Uncorking a Story, Cindy Finch.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here with you, and let's uncork this story.
Let's get to the uncorking. Cindy, we've spoken before about grief and your battle with cancer, and if I'm right, and that's a big if. Tonight we might be focusing on the path forward. So I'm curious, where does the story behind this book begin?
This immediately in 2021, Mike, when I published When Grief is Good, I knew there needed to be a workbook because the concepts of reinvention are just too wobbly to really grab and really plot life out. So I started writing it all through the pandemic in my head right after the other book came out. And now here we are.
Well, since you referenced When Grief is Good or Grief is Good, give us a little bit of an overview on that, because I'm guessing some of our new listeners do not know what that book is about.
Absolutely. I wrote When Grief is Good to share the message that life is hard, but it can be good. And that grief is actually this guru that can come and guide us and change us, take us through the dark night of our soul, and bring us out the other side transformed. Even though nobody likes grief, you cannot imagine how difficult marketing that book has been, because as soon as anybody reads grief, they're like, oh, yeah, no, great book, read it, love it, bye, can't market it. Nobody wants grief. So as a culture, we are very grief avoidant. And that's why we need an epic comeback from our hard times.
No, I like how you just weave that right in there.
That right? Did you feel that when I did that?
I felt the weave. I felt the weave.
Felt the weave.
Grief, When Grief is Good. Nothing to do with Charlie Brown, I take it.
No, this is not good grief. I mean, there is a book called that, but this is more like, hey, some shit has went down. Can I swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
I forget. You'll tell me, right? You'll give me if not.
Survey says, no, you can swear.
The red X. Yeah, this grief is good because it changes me. Let me tell you a couple good things about grief. First of all, grief is the birthplace of empathy. This is huge because until I've actually been through terrible, hard, difficult, challenging things, I can only imagine them cerebrally. I can't really feel what it feels like to go through that. But as soon as I'm Mike Carlin and I have triplets, and then I go, oh shit, I have to figure all of this out. That it's not until that point that I have empathy for other parents of multiples, right? Until you have cancer, it's impossible to understand what that's like. Not that you need to have it so you can help people, but boy, does it change things. Right now, our daughter is expecting her first baby, and she tells me, I see pregnant women everywhere now because she's having that experience herself. That's why grief is good. It changes us.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was talking to my daughter recently, and she has just moved into Manhattan. And she said, she's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much you guys did for us until now she's on her own, kind of doing it for herself. And it's, but it is, and now she's not going through grief. I mean, she's going through some pain because she's paying New York City rents and
That's
and
right.
has three roommates in a two-bedroom, but that's her decision.
Right.
But I
Oh,
love this idea of grief being sort of the birthplace of empathy. I've never really thought about it like that. But having shared experience with one another, that's where true empathy comes from. Not just sympathy, but empathy. My brother would often talk. As you and I both know, he passed away of cancer, but he had a good friend who was a family member who was going through it as well, and they would have these long, in-depth, deep conversations because they were going through that shared experience. And of course, that is rooted in grief. And had had they not been in that shared experience, they couldn't be a resource like that for each other.
it's so true. I used to have clients that would call. I had one client who had a really aggressive cancer, and she would go into her closet and call me and whisper talk during our session because anytime she would bring up a hard topic of cancer, or honestly, her approach, her feeling was she wanted to be done. She didn't want any more treatments or surgeries. And her family could not hear that from her. They would not allow her to talk negatively, plan for end of life. So, this is one of those things that, unless somebody had been in her shoes, they wouldn't be able to tolerate the discomfort of saying, well, what are your choices? You don't have to do treatments and the protocols and the surgeries and the interventions because it actually is your choice. But she couldn't talk to anybody else in her family about that. So here we were, she was in her closet. And ultimately, she did do all the treatments. But there's this moment of truth when you're suffering that you're like, really? Really? Is this it? And maybe I don't have what it takes to do that. So that's where empathy is so helpful, being able to hold a space for somebody.
Yeah, and caretakers, I think, have a hard time with hearing the person they're taking care of say something like, "I just don't have the fight in me anymore," or
Yeah.
I just want to stop," because they're your cheerleader and they're performing their role, but they also haven't gone through it. They don't know exactly what you're feeling necessarily. Um, I just remember hearing those, for my brother. He would tell things to me that he couldn't say in front of his wife.
Yeah.
Um, because she was, and her to me, like I was like I was like an in between
In between.
for
Yeah.
them, right? So she would say things to me that she didn't want Greg to hear. Greg would say things to me that he didn't want her to hear, and then I just would talk into my pillow. That's
Right. Well, what else are you going to do at that point? That's a lot of heavy lifting.
there was a little bit of heavy lifting. But tell me about the title of Epic Comeback. How did the title come to you?
So the title, you can't believe when you write a book or something how difficult finding a title is. I actually called this something like "Getting Your Life Back." I had other titles that were like "How to Reinvent Yourself," and I did a sample. I had like this group of 20 women that I sampled all the titles. I laid them out for them and I had them vote. And the comeback was the big one. And then my husband Darren said, "Epic. You've made an epic comeback." And people really don't want to make a comeback unless it can be pretty epic in some way. At least you hope. So that's where the title came from, Epic Comeback. And then the reinvention piece is right there. You got to, man, life can burn you down. And there's a rebuild. There's a rebuild that needs to happen. There's also a lot of energy that comes from a particular story that I tell in the book about this gal. When I worked in the ICU, there's a gal that was in and out of cancer treatments, and she landed in the ICU straight from the ER. And she had an entire phoenix, mythological phoenix, tattooed on her bald head because she said, anytime my hair falls out, I need this as my reminder. And to me, that like gritty, like ability to go through hard things, that was epic to me. So her story's in this book as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's a good thing that you weren't in Rhode Island or Massachusetts at the time, because this book would be called Wicked Comeback.
The Wicked Comeback. Is that what
Wicked, it's a wicked comeback.
That's right. That's right. Maybe that's the next version too.
Well, tell me, what can, if people who purchase this book, what could they expect to kind of learn and go through as they're kind of working through Epic Comeback?
Um, what they can expect is a very airy, flowy layout. That's one of the first things. I'm going to just flip through it because I want our viewers to be able to see how light and airy this book is. And I say that because these are hard topics. So I know people are like, well, she's holding her book up. But when I'm dealing with a hard topic, I need a lot of room to breathe. I need a lot of room to breathe. And so that's the first thing. They're going to get validation. They're going to get a space to see their story, lay it out, and work through the different chunks of it. For instance, I have an entire middle section on forgiveness, apologizing, making amends, rebuilding trust, and handling conflicts. And somebody might ask me, why in the world would you put like such a specific set of assignments in there? And I say, because anytime life is really grinding us into the ground, it's also affecting our relationships. And because resilience is a team sport, I'm going to say it again, resilience is a team sport. Anytime I'm bouncing back from something, I need my tribe around me. And ultimately, when life smacks us down, there was a tribe along with us, whether that's at work, in a marriage, in a family, in your job. There were people involved in that. And so relationships are key. I mean, Mike, the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives, right? You ever know anybody in a really difficult marriage? They are hard to be with sometimes. They may have more depression. They may struggle more, finances. So that's why the relationship piece of this is so key.
Yeah, I mean, it always, like when you were telling me about the middle of that book, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is like working the steps, because there's part of that in there as well, and that's all part of recovery. I would take. At least that's the way it was like landing with me anyway.
Right. That's right. There's a whole trustworthy checklist. How do you know if somebody's trustworthy again? Like, it's an entire checklist that you follow. And it's so important because oftentimes when I'm estranged or hurt by somebody, I'm eager to get reconnected with them, but maybe they haven't changed. So how do I know? Here's a little funny story that goes with this section as well. Earlier this summer, I was writing the section on apologizing. And I had two clients in my practice who had both come to me that said, we're a parent and child, and we want to apologize for our frayed relationship. And as I was writing this book, I was giving them exercises. And then sometimes they would say, yeah, that didn't work, send something else. And so I would go back and revise it. But here's the number one thing I learned is that just because somebody says they're sorry, it may not fix the hurt. And that's a really big thing. Also, if you're somebody who is apologizing, seeking forgiveness, the person that you're making amends with or saying sorry to, they may not want it. They may not accept it. They may not want to be close to you after that. That's the other thing. One of my clients, a father, said, well, I don't know why he's still mad. I said I was sorry. And it was actually his apology kind of made the relationship worse.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, because on the one hand, I can think, hey, it may not make it better unless there's an action that follows it. Whatever harmful behavior you've exhibited in the past has to change, and things have to evolve. So there has to be an action that comes with the words, right? So I'm sorry has to be a verb, as well as an emotion.
That's
But
right.
but if you're locked in this relationship, or I don't know what you would call it, a trauma bonded relationship, or oh gosh, I don't know what the right word would be. And somebody tries to change the dynamic of that relationship through an
Ooh,
apology. that
Yeah.
could just threaten someone's like worldview.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I want to apologize. And more than that, I want to move on with them, right? I want to move on now. Here's what happened. I'm just going to give you the lowdown. So, as a father and son, dad was in his 80s, son was in his early 50s. Dad was apologizing for childhood and young adulthood. And he made the apology, and son said, "Yeah, that's not good enough because your actions created a trajectory in my life that I had to deal with. And it was very negative." And the dad said, "Well, I said I'm sorry." And the son said, it doesn't matter to me. So he was apologizing for decades. And it was very interesting to see that it actually created a gridlock. So they weren't able to move past it. So that's why I actually added a section on gridlock into the book, because when I'm trying to make an epic comeback, I can look as good as I want to on the outside. But if behind the scenes, all my relationships are trashed and conflicted and bitter and gridlocked, who am I going to share my epic comeback with? Who am I really if my relationships, Harvard says at the end of our lives, there are really just two things that matter: meaningful work and quality relationships. And that's at the heart of this. If you're going to make a comeback, make it with your key people, if possible.
If possible. Yeah. We started off by kind of talking about, cancer and, because we have mutual stories there and in disease, but who else is epic comeback for? Because it's not just people who have gone through, a major health crisis.
That's right. Thank you for asking that. So this is an excellent resource for people coming out of divorce, especially when it was not amicable or when betrayal was involved, because there's an entire section on trying to get underneath how you felt victimized. Survivor, then to an empowered creator. So people who've gone through divorce, women who have experienced domestic violence and are single parenting, any number of people who've experienced violence, who've been victimized. Also, the other one is I have a number of people in a class right now who've lost somebody in their life. So they've had a death. One client I work with, her husband, they had the perfect marriage and he died after 45 years of marriage, which amazing, right? But she can't function now. She is literally locked up in her own life because of that loss and how intertwined they were. So this has helped her get some steps going in a direction of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up, somebody who's been together for 45 years. My parents were together. It would have been 67 years this October. My mom passed away in July.
Mm-hmm.
And, I look and see how that impacted my dad. And, knock on wood, he's had some good days.
Yeah.
92 years old, but I know how much he misses his wife, my mom,
That's
because
right.
of the things that he shares with me. And you just sort of, those things that you don't want to admit to everybody,
That's right. That's
people like
right.
to admit deep things to me.
You're the
But
hub.
I'm going to, I'm going to change my name to the Hub, Mike the Hub.
I'm going to say, let's hub a story with Mike, because you have so many people talking to you.
I do. And those are just the people that you know about. I mean, there are people in my head that talk to me all the time.
All the time. That's what I've heard about you.
The rumors, unfortunately, are true. I hear the term workbook, right? And my mind immediately goes back to being in grammar school.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, take out the workbook. And it's like, no, that means we're going to have to do like word problems or something.
I know.
It's work. And, things that we don't like to do is work. But how do you, how do you make it so that this is something that people don't view as work?
So right away, I jump in and have people identify what their playlist is. They're doing art projects if they want to. They're learning dynamic stories. They're taking time to pause and reflect. Your point is so well taken, though, because I kept calling it a guidebook. guidebook, because that concept of work when I'm grieving, miserable. When I'm just trying to keep my head above water, I don't have any more energy. So, for instance, on this, I don't know if I can share real quick, but I'll share this page. It's called Songs to Help You Grow Through What You Go Through. So, for instance, this page, this section of the guidebook is literally just to help you organize your comeback playlist. Because, listen, when you're making an epic comeback, you need a soundtrack, right? Like you need the Rocky theme, you need Eye of the Tiger, or you need whatever your particular flavor is. But for instance, we do this because this needs to be more like a guided journal rather than like, get to work, buddy.
So I'm going to invite anyone who is watching on the live stream right now to put in the chat or the Q&A what some of their go-to songs would be. So let's see if anybody wants to do that. But Cindy, what's on your playlist? Like, what would be in your epic comeback playlist?
Oh yeah, my epic comeback. Well, one of them, it's old school, but Katy Perry, Firework, and then That Girl Is on Fire.
Oh sure, Alicia Keys.
Yeah, Alicia Keys. I also do. I love Taylor Swift because she's the ultimate comeback. Come on, I'm a Swiftie. I heard her in an interview say, "Look, I've taken everything bad that's happened to me and I've turned it into a hit song. And guess what? They rock." And you know what they do? If you listen to her music, I mean, I know Taylor Swift is slightly controversial right now, but that girl, damn, she's badass.
She's a market mover. I mean, look, I saw her live, I don't know, 5 years ago. Not this tour, the tour prior. Took a couple of kids, their friends. Phenomenal performer, amazing talent. Got to shake her hand. It was a surreal experience. That's a story for another time. We do have one viewer who says "Let's Go Girls" by Shania Twain. So there we go. A little Shania. Did you know, Cindy, who Shania Twain was married to?
No, was it you
No, not me. That would be a surprise to me and to everyone
and
else.
your wife? And
Uh,
yeah,
but Mutt Lange, who was a producer, legendary rock producer, produced Def Leppard and the Cars. There you
I
go.
think he kind of did her in though a little bit, is
Well,
what I heard.
maybe he was played by Anthony Michael Hall in the Def Leppard movie. Don't ask me why I know these things. I just do.
It's just got to be. Well, you got to have her pour some sugar on you, man. That's all I'm saying with that.
You know what? I think that could be on my epic comeback playlist. That was one of my favorites in '87.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So what else? One thing I also noticed in the workbook is an emphasis on journaling. And as a writer, and as somebody who's interviewed hundreds of authors and writers, I know how impactful writing can be. As a therapeutic device, but as just like even just that process of channeling words through you, just to getting them, from wherever they come from onto the paper. And I'm curious as to, your decision to include journaling in the workbook.
It's kind of a funny decision. I'm glad you're asking me because technically I'm not a journaler. I don't have the patience for journaling. And I heard it said once and it just stuck with me like, I don't know, Jesus never journaled. So I don't know if he did, but here's what it is. There's spaces to write. But can I tell you, Mike, that when across the board I have clients do writing or journaling exercises, they freeze up because they feel that if they write about it, it makes it real. It's bigger, it's overwhelming. So here's what I did. I took my the matriarchy of my 20 women, and I said, what do you think of this section and this section? And overwhelmingly, everybody who was under 40 in that group said, could you give more check boxes and less white space? So what I did, I'll show you in this example right here, is I included places where people, hold on, let me do my share. I'm getting there. Patience.
I love show and tell. So this is fantastic.
Is this okay? Is this okay? All right.
Absolutely.
So on this page, there is a self care formula I'm walking people through on seeing things from different sides, right? You need different perspectives when you're sorting. But then I go through and I do checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. And this is all the way through. So you don't have to think too much, but you can get a little drop of an idea or a guidance. So I tried to do a blended model where you can read, you can look at pictures, you can fill in the blanks, but you can also just like float above it and just give a couple check boxes. Because why? Epic comebacks are hard. They take a lot of energy because you're coming up out of the pits.
Yeah. I'm curious, leave this page. Actually, if you wouldn't mind putting that page back up, because
Yeah.
I love the check boxes and I was kind of getting lost in there. But I see like three things that you're willing to do in the next few days. Um, and these all seem like things that I would love to do the next 3 days. But like, how can people hold themselves accountable, given that they're answering this in a workbook or a guidebook?
It's it's so it's so fun that you asked me this because throughout this workbook, I have threaded through I've asked this question at the end of most sections. Okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Here's what the book says. And then I say, what's going to get in my way of doing this? So I actually build in contingency plans for when you close the book and then you're like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't want to, or I can't. The first thing is I say that's okay. Because there's lots of things, that are good ideas, but we don't have energy for. Like, let's say after our partner betrays us, if you read, for instance, if you read a story in there called The Clear Process, there's a devastating story of divorce and betrayal. I laid out the steps that she took to come out of that, but it was a hot minute before this person can do that because of the complexities. So I build in fail safes. For instance, I say, what am I going to do to undermine this? What are my beliefs about self care and self compassion? What do I need to help me get over the hump? And who can help me? And what do I need to do to call them or reach out? So I try to factor that in, Mike, because it's real. I can know everything. In fact, if we're not careful, we have so much information that we don't have transformation.
Yeah. And just looking at these uh, uh, choices, how did you come up with this list of things to choose from? I mean, are these science based or these evidence based? How did you shortlist these?
Yes. So, first of all, personal. These are many personal things I do, and then observational from watching my clients, my family members, my husband. And then I would take the temperature of people around me. For instance, lots of people do not draw or paint, but a lot of people like to cook and bake. So both of those things are there. And then meditating with an app, that's me all day long, but I'm not probably going to go to a yoga class, right? So I tried to kind of do a yin and yang. And I guess just in my profession as a therapist, there's regular go-to things that scientifically help. For instance, exercise is shown to reduce the symptoms of depression on the first go around after I think 20 or 30 minutes unilaterally without exception. However, getting out the door to do that is a different matter, right? So the science backs all of these things. These are touch, these are being with other people. Like if you look on the right side second column, volunteer or help others is a proven way to lift your own mood. It's proven, like in research trials, it's given out by insurance companies. Please go volunteer so you'll use less insurance benefits.
Well, yeah, but it is interesting. It's like, I did for my 50th birthday this year. Everyone's like, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, you know what? There's no activity. Yeah, I don't want to go out to dinner, right? I don't want to have a party, or I didn't want to have a party. But the one thing I chose to do on the day of my 50th was to go volunteer. I
Yes.
volunteered at a soup kitchen, and part of me was like, okay, is this like am I being selfish by doing this? In the sense that I knew it was going to make me feel better about myself. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that wasn't necessarily the primary motivation. So now then I was talking myself out of, am I doing a good thing? I'm
Right.
turning into Woody Allen right now. But
I
it's
know. Right. Well, there's probably primary, secondary, right? So I am helping and it is helping me, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it.
right.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. How did you feel afterwards?
I felt good. I felt hungry because it looked like the meal was actually going to be quite good. Although the meal, it's funny, we have a Capital Grill in town, and any kind of leftover food that they have, they donate to the this particular shelter.
Yeah.
So it was actually, they made a stew out of it. I'm like, man, this actually smells pretty good.
Not bad. Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
smell bad at all. All right, what else do we need to know about Epic Comeback, Cindy? What else? What am I not asking you that I should be considering?
Okay. Well, how about this? So, this entire workbook is couched in the science of resiliency. So, the Rugged Resilience Measure is a 10-point questionnaire that is all about whether you're resilient or not. People can find this on my website at cindyfinch.com that says, how resilient are you? That's the first part. I have written all of this curriculum to fit making you better. The second part is it's also couched in the post traumatic growth framework. So we understand trauma. Trauma are those terrible things that happen to us that create a chain of events inside of us. So the other day, my friend's car got robbed. Somebody smashed and grabbed, popped the trunk, took everything. And there were several days and weeks she had to fill out police reports, replace the items, go to an insurance company. But there were days and weeks where she kept just replaying what had happened and not understanding, okay, what could I have done differently? Why did this happen to me? What is the deal? And it was with her day and night because a trauma had occurred. So trauma can lodge in us, and if we're not careful and work to remove it, it just starts rattling around inside of us, and it can create post-traumatic stress, PTSD. So this is actually a remedy for PTSD. So we treat trauma and PTSD in different ways in my field, but this is specifically geared toward developing post-traumatic growth. So post-traumatic growth, Mike, is the good things that can happen from the bad things. And let me tell you, they're everywhere. Like getting to do the podcast with you over the summer after Greg passed. I don't think we would have done that had you not walked through that dark tunnel. Like that was such an invitation into new avenues of helping people, of healing, of conversations. That's post-traumatic growth. I could go on here, so I'm going to just bite my tongue.
I do want to invite the audience to put any questions they have in the Q&A, any questions that you have for Cindy, but I want to reflect on post-traumatic growth for a second. I do love that term. But it's not easy. It doesn't mean that you're going to not have, some kind of a negative feeling as you're going through it.
That's
Because,
right.
we were all born with tear ducts for a reason, or else we wouldn't have them, right? So it is, and I think we started this, by talking about grief and how we want to avoid grief at all costs. And we do tend to want to avoid things that make us feel uncomfortable. That's why many of us, have a hard time getting up and going for that run at 5:30 in the morning, or hitting the gym, or doing, making hard decisions. So just talk about like the willingness to go through it, with knowing that you might find resistance or sadness or something uncomfortable on the other side.
That's absolutely right. A story comes to my mind when we did the book launch in 2021. The venue that we were at, they called me last minute and they said, "Oh, we wanted to make a signature cocktail for your book release tomorrow night. So, what would you like it to be?" And I said, "Well, geez, what is the signature cocktail of grief and loss? I mean, isn't that tequila shots at the bar? Or, it's a lot, right? It's a lot because we drink because we don't want to feel I don't want to feel these things. So I'm going to share another page if that's okay with you,
Sure.
because there's a lot of feels that go with big loss. I've been through a divorce. I've been through, I mean, you could read there's your copy's on its way. I disclose some not so pretty sides of me and things that have happened. So if you look at this page and you look over at the box here, it's how I thought life would be, and then how life actually is, and the disconnect. So I'll tell you where I got this little graphic from. People used to come into my office and say, just kind of a common story. My gosh, we had 3 kids and we raised them, and now one's on drugs, one won't speak to us, and one has a sugar daddy, and we don't know what to do with that. So these parents would say, gosh, we sent them to good schools, we were present for them, we taught them our values, we did X, Y, and Z, and now life's off the chain with them. What did we do wrong? And I said, nothing, because this is just how life is. Because we all think it's going to go one way and something else happens. Am I right?
Hmm. Absolutely. I really love this visual here, because it's not a linear staircase where you're climbing. It looks more like a large intestine, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at
And
here.
look at the sad face on the top who's like, ow, this hurts. It's all, wah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I had one author on the show. Her name was Aileen Weintraub. Amazing. She talked about prepartum depression, which was not a term you really hear, but kind of depression before you have a baby. And she said to me, she's like, you know what, uh, life doesn't throw you curveballs. Life is the curveball, and
yes.
that always stuck with me. But I realized I just cut you off, Cindy.
No, it's okay. In fact, my husband Darren got a giggle out of something. I'll show you what it was. I didn't catch this, but he did. It's early on in the book. He kind of goes, well, I guess people know sort of like what this is when they look at this page. So let me show you because it also made me giggle. It was along the point of life is hard, exactly like Eileen was saying. Hold on now. I got to find it. Here it is. Let me make it big. So I'm going to come back to our chat here and share this from my side. Okay. So on one side, it says, I'm so glad you found me. Let's get started. And on the other side, it says, death of the dream. And so my husband said, boy, that's a welcome. That's an introduction right there where we're like, hey, let's get started. It's going to be great. Yeah, everything is that you thought was going to be, or a lot of things are not going to go that way. And that's the point. Like life is going to be hard. So I built in this whole section on crying exactly for the point that you said earlier. Because what do I do with all of the different things that come my way? I understand that some people maybe are not big criers, but boy, I would. I had some tears to shed when things were really hard. So let me hop over there and I'm going to show you. If I can get there, we may need to have some music in between here.
That's all
Anyhow,
right.
if I can't, if I can't get there, you'll help me out.
I could tell a joke if you like, Cindy.
But yeah, that would be just so good. You're good at it, and I think you've also been going to your comedy class. So so here it is. I have embedded an entire section on how to cry, why to cry, what you need when you cry, people around you. And I have a place in my house called the Cry Closet, where I specifically go to move emotion on its way through me. And I want our listeners to remember emotion is energy in motion. Emotion. It's meant to go through you. It's not meant to go in you and stay stuck.
Because what happens when it stays stuck? Like what happens when you hold in that cry? What happens to your body?
You tell me, how does it feel?
It feels awful. Like it feels like, a bomb is waiting to explode.
That's right. My shoulders get heavy. My neck hurts.
But for me, it's like my head, like the worst sinus pressure I've ever had.
That's
Uh,
right.
and it's an awful feeling. But like I said before, like we've got tear ducts for a reason. I mean, there were so many times after my brother passed, I didn't know how to handle that emotion. I would often wind up crying, well, first of all, randomly, especially when it was fresh,
That's right.
even a month after the shock wore off. Like it's like random times, right, where you just start to lose it. But I would find myself often crying in the shower.
Yes.
And that was like my place. I mean, not because I was ashamed of my body, and I can't help but make a joke, but like I would cry in the shower. And if I didn't, if I held it in, it was pure pain,
That's right.
absolute pain.
And I can't function at work. So this is a very small subset of people, but as a therapist, if I haven't properly or recently processed my emotions, it's really hard for me to help people sort theirs.
Yeah.
Now, I have good friends that they're not big criers. What they do is they exercise like vigorously. So that's built in here too, because that will help move that heaviness for them. And so that's really good. I saw one thing. Can I bring our listeners back to it real quick?
Absolutely. And I want you to know, Cindy, that one of our listeners started the resilience assessment and she loves it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yay. Yay. And I tried to put really fun pictures in there, like fun pictures of our pets and different things to help us like carry on. Okay. So, first, Mike, I want to show you this because it's going to speak right to what we're talking about today. So, on the left hand side, you can see again this idea of how I thought life was going to go, and then the reality of what happens. And there's these ups and downs, and these spiked valleys, these storms. But underneath the whole thing is this process of transformation. And isn't this just true sometimes? How it
Yeah.
feels like I'm just going to glide. And then it was like, no, dang it. But here is the thing I want to share without making anybody um, without making anybody seasick. Let me get this on my own so I don't hop around too much on the screen. That would be miserable. So a friend of mine passed away this year, and she was a really special friend to me. She and I were diagnosed and went through cancer together. Her name is Sharon, and we went through all the fallout and then all the rebuild together. We raised our kids together. And I remember one day, so just part of my story, I had cancer and then I went into remission for 5 years. Important side note, I had cancer while I was pregnant. So there was a strange kind of eeriness with that because it's a precarious situation for the expectant mom. So my friend Sharon, after my 5 year remission, I started having symptoms of cancer again. So I went to the doctor. They're like, we don't know, go to Mayo Clinic. And that was like through 6 other hospitals on the way. So I get there and they're like, ooh, yeah, so you have heart, liver, and lung failure from the previous cancer treatments. Let me just take a beat on that because a lot of survivors of one catastrophic event get through it. And then shit, there's all this other stuff that comes with it, like divorce. It's one thing to go through a betrayal and through a divorce, through custody and all of that. It's another thing to start dating. It's another thing to see your ex and their new wife. It's another, right? There's these chapters and layers with it. It's very difficult. So I found myself in this difficult situation, and I called my friend Sharon and I told her, look, I don't think I can do what they're recommending. Mayo Clinic said, we need to give you open heart surgery. I was in my 30s. And so I got open heart surgery. And then they're like, yeah, that didn't work. We need to now do open lung surgery. And so here's me. I mean, I wasn't sitting upright. I was in bed, but I was like, I can't. I can't. I don't know. I can't. So we were on the phone. I was bemoaning this to her. And she said, okay, Cindy, you need to get off the pity pot and get on with this. Put on your big girl panties and do the thing. So let me share this with you because this is exactly what I write into this: my pity pot and my big girl panties. So for readers, I have them identify, what is your pity pot? I felt really sorry for myself. I felt really overwhelmed, and I should have. It was a bad deal. But being able to, what I say here, find my footing in the chaos, really important. So then I have people figure out, how do you put on your big girl panties? How do you show up and do things you don't want to do? Very, very difficult. But I will dedicate, and I have dedicated this to Sharon, because she's the one that was like, girl, you need to get over it and get on with it and go.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's true.
I want to go back to something you mentioned before, which is, there's the divorce, and then there's the dating, and then there's the seeing your previous, partner with their new person, and then maybe they start another family. And it's like, we think of these things as like potential finish lines, right? So the divorce is the finish line. That's what I'm kind of running towards. But then what you realize that it's just another starting line in disguise, right? And I used to have this running coach who would say that to me, the finish line is another starting line in disguise, because there's going to be another race. There's going to be, another day of training. Taking your experience, it's okay. Well, I finished my cancer treatment, but that led me to, issues with my heart, issues with my lungs. It's like, it like really is a domino effect.
It really is, because the person that entered that is not the same person I was when I left it. I was really broken down. I also had complex PTSD. I had no idea I had. I just kept having panic attacks on the way to work every morning. I didn't know that was PTSD until a helping professional said, so let's talk about this. And so you're exactly right, because doing life and finishing cancer treatments was one race. I had no idea how many races were past that. There were significant and many.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote this book.
I want to pause on the heavy stuff for a minute, because I'm looking at your t-shirt. What does it say on your t-shirt?
Hello, beautiful. This is from.
What's the story behind this t-shirt?
Okay, the story behind this t-shirt is, one, it's just cute. Two, that I was having technical difficulties, so I did not put on my podcast shirt that I was going to put on. I left on my work shirt. And I think as many people as can have a positive reflection back to them that, you know what, you rock. You rock. And there's been days I needed somebody to say, hey, beautiful, you got this. I'll tell you what my husband Darren used to say. I'd be like, I am such a mess. Like, I am so messed up from this. He said these words. It was big to me. He goes, I remember who you are. I remember who you are. And it was like, thank God somebody does, because I had no vision of myself. I didn't look the same. I didn't feel the same. I couldn't move the same. Before cancer, I'd just done a triathlon. And then I couldn't walk to my own mailbox. So it was like in my 30s. So it was like such whiplash in life, which is, again, one of those races where you're like, when is this going to be over? Only to have a new race emerge at a new level.
You've mentioned Darren's name 3 times. So please tell me his favorite show was Bewitched.
Right, Darren. Okay, little known truth. His mom named him after Darren from Bewitched, with the exact same spelling, Darin. And my mom named me after Cindy from the Brady Bunch. So you can tell that we're kids of the 70s, right? Darren and Cindy.
I love it. I love it. Did you have a dog named Tiger?
No, we didn't, but I do have magical powers.
Oh, see, now you're Samantha. So
I'm fine with being Samantha. Let me show you something in here actually about him. Okay, I'm going to tell you a funny story, and I know there is one person in your audience who may not know this story, but she knows us. So writing a book it takes a lot. It's stressful. And I was in charge of layout and design and editing. So I had a team working with me, but I was probably not very fun to live with over the summer when I was hitting deadlines and wrapping it up. And Darren and I would get in some arguments and fights. And I had written him into the book early a story about him being my secret strength. And I've said that, and he absolutely is. He's a foundation and a mountain in my life. But I got mad at him and I wrote him out. I wrote him out of the very first part of the book. However, when we resolved it and we got back to good, I included a part in this book called Making Up for Lost Time. And I'm going to show it to our folks that are watching with us today, because it's really important to me. Post-traumatic growth is about making up for what happened in new ways. And when I did this part of the book, I write very explicitly about the struggles that he and I have had. He married me. I was a single mom. I had 2 little kids. By year 1, I was pregnant with our third. By year 2, I was in full cancer treatments. By year 7, I was in a wheelchair. And so my poor husband, we went through some things, and then here we were, both trauma survivors, basically by that point, trying to live together, blended family, cancer survivor, caregiver. And to this day, I still have never been a caregiver to somebody with life-threatening illness like he has. It messes with you. You know that, Mike. It messes with you on a core level. So there's this part in the back of the book where all is well, and I bring him back into it. So I hope people can be patient while I find it. I gotta scroll. Side note, I have a whole section in here on loss of a pet, because people losing our pets is really big. And I have yet to find any really good material on pet loss and processing that. So just a little surprise for people.
A little plug for those of us who have held our 4-legged friends in our arms while they drift off to the Rainbow Bridge.
Yes, loving the Rainbow Bridge and the Invisible Leash, one of my favorites. Okay, so this is called Seizing the Day, How to Reclaim Your Time. And I write in here about mine and Darren's story, and then ways to rekindle love, creating new traditions, and trying to take back what was taken from us. And it's really important, because people who almost die or who almost lose somebody, because I'm changed now at a core level, you know what I'm talking about, right? Anytime you go through something very stressful and it doesn't take you out, you always kind of live with this, oh shit, that could have happened. And now everything I do from that point on, I'm able to do it. Like I'm freaked out every day. I'm like, I'm alive. This is a trip. I'm so grateful, because I know what it's like to not be that. And so here we are. All right, getting on with staying on topic. I walk through the readers through this idea of deepening connections, living out your bucket list, reflecting on what you have, and making up for what was lost very creatively and specifically. So that's one of the things I want to share about Darren from Bewitched.
Now, I'm curious if his mother was more of a Dick York or a Dick Sargent fan, because
Who was the first?
I think it was Dick York was the first.
That's the favorite. That's the fan favorite. He's the only true Darren.
Yeah, somebody in the audience could correct me, but I couldn't help but seeing rekindling love in there. I have a friend of mine who did one of the things that you mentioned, which is writing love notes, because I saw that, right, and hiding love notes. This guy hid a love note in their toaster, right, because he knew his wife would have the same thing for breakfast every morning. However, she neglected to find the love note before she put the thing down in the toaster, and all of a sudden, the toaster caught on fire.
That's what
So that's
I
rekindling love right there, isn't it?
it'll never be forgotten. It'll never be forgotten because no good deed goes unpunished, first of all. But second of all, that is the love note that gift just keeps on giving because that's a hilarious story. Did
Yeah.
they burn the house down?
House didn't burn down, but she did run off with the fireman who came to put out the fire. So
No, you're
yeah.
not being truthful. Don't
Well,
stop.
I may have taken some artistic license.
Okay, but it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
we had
Um,
we had a 2014 road trip that almost left us leaving each other. So this had to be in here for us. But it's the trip we don't speak of. Remember, I told you there's certain things we don't speak of, and that is one of them.
Growing up, as an aside, we always drove to Florida every year. So we live in Connecticut. We're from Florida, so we'd go back, drive back, see grandma, all that. Dad, it was a lot cheaper to drive 6 people down than fly in the 1980s. So we're driving down, we catch a stomach bug that
Oh,
goes through the car. Now you want to talk about a trip that should never be mentioned again, but don't you know, as traumatic as that experience was, because there were a lot of stops on that trip. There were a lot of stops on that trip. There were beautiful
it was
stops.
amazing.
Stops, amazing stops on that trip. A lot of stops on the trip. But that if you ask us to get in a room, those of us who are left in my family, to get in a room and talk about the most memorable trips we've taken as a family, that's going to be in the top 3, and we laugh about it now.
It was the diarrhea, like coming out both ends kind of
Oh
trip.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was not it was not pleasant.
Not pleasant.
It was very not pleasant.
Not at all. It's going to be amazing. Hey, yeah, because every parent's nightmare
Yeah.
right there when you're just trying to get. Did your dad lose his mind over that?
He's the one who did not get sick. He was the only one who didn't get sick. Um but everyone else, man, it just hit us hard. It was like Captain Trips from Stephen King's what was it, The Stand.
Oh my gosh. I love that it's now like in the family album of top most memorable.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Cindy, this has been a fun conversation, and I'm sure there are people listening who want to know where they can buy Epic Comeback.
Absolutely. You can go to my website, cindyfinch.com. It's also on Amazon. So either of those places. And if you just need it and can't afford it, I'll send you the electronic version. If you reach out to me, info@cindyfinch.com.
Info@cindyfinch.com. All right, write that down, and you'll get an electronic version. Also, Cindy, are you active on social media? If people want to follow you or learn more, what do they do?
Facebook, Instagram @cinfinch. Absolutely.
Easy
And
enough.
can I share one little thing additional?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm just going to put this out there. Okay, there's a couple things that came as asides to doing this, but I realized they were important. And here they are. Let me get to the right place. I'm going to share this section because this is a constant problem with people who come into my office, especially women. It's about people pleasing. And on my journey to launching this comeback curriculum, it was inevitable that some people were not going to be happy with how I was presenting it. It just is. Anytime you're going to another level, there's growth pains. I love how Kevin Hart says that life is like very much like a video game. You're working through levels as you go. And if you can't get all the Easter eggs and points on one, you got to go back and do it again. So life does have that game-like quality to it. So I wrote this section in here on breaking free from people pleasing. And it doesn't seem initially that it would go with getting over grief or moving through divorce or a diagnosis, but it's a sneaky sticker in your sock if you don't get under what's best for me versus what other people need you to do or want to do. And there is a little part in here called the bully clause. So right here, I say power up with a bully clause. And that is a little hidden story that came directly from the designer, Kelly Nichols, a story that goes with her. And so that was really fun for me to be able to put that in there as an actionable way. So the thing that I got some gruff for was this next section. I do quizzes and all kinds of things in here because it's fun to do quizzes and check to see where you're at. This section right here, page 153, it's called Finding God When It's Hard, The Journey of the 5 Prayers. So my spiritual life and my relationship with God were incredibly important, although very vexing during my time of suffering. So I had people recommend that I leave this out. And I said, all right, let me think about it. I actually went to prayer. I prayed. And I was like, God, like, what do you think? Because this is controversial. And I felt, now, I don't know, you can delete this later if you want, Mike, but I felt like I had this return reply from God that he was like, he was like, well, if I recall, we were in that every minute, every day of that together, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I say, leave it in. So this section right here, the journey of the 5 prayers, is really, really special to me. And I hope if people need it, that they get it. And again, this is my offer. If you can't afford my workbook, just let me know. I'll send it to you, because the things that I learned in the spiritual aspects of my life that directly impacted the physical, financial, emotional, and intellectual came from these 5 prayers.
I'm curious as to what the 5 prayers are.
Well, do you want me to walk it through? Do we have time? You'll tell me, right?
We have time. I always have time for you, Cindy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's do it real quick. So I start with very basic prayer. You know, when you're a young person of faith, you're often taught in your faith gathering that there is this way to pray. So the first prayer is, let me find it here.
And are these not necessarily prayers for any one specific religion or domination? Are we saying prayer with like a wide, like we're not excluding anybody here, are we?
No, absolutely not. I think that here's the thing, like religion is small, but God is big and totally undefinable and mysterious. Like as soon as religious people and people from organized type institutions start trying to put their brand and their mark on God, I think God just kind of giggles and then stands outside of all of it. I don't think there's a way to define and capture and correctly harness God. I think a lot of it's a mystery. So I'll leave that there. And I say that in here. But what I do say is that, look, I grew up from a teenager in an evangelical Christian background, not my home, but the group that I became connected with. So that was my framework. But I've talked to people from all walks of life and faith who had very similar experiences with God, even though the label on it was very different. So I just say, I don't know. I'm not God. So I will leave people to figure that out. So prayer 1 is literally here, giving praise, repenting, just saying, hey, sorry, I kind of blew it, asking for help, and then yielding. And then prayer 2 is maturing, integrating your sacred writings and scriptures into your prayer. And then prayer 3. Let me find prayer 3. Well, here's prayer 4. We'll just go to that. The prayer of presence. So I say that there's times when I really don't have a grocery list of requests to give to God. You know, when you're kind of like trying to figure out God, you're like, all right, here's my list of things I need help with. Here's the grocery list. Because isn't God kind of like a vending machine? Just I'll put in my prayer, I'll get out what I need. But as life goes on and you realize that it's not so much that prayer is really more to help me, to change me. I began understanding God in a different way, that my prayer literally some days was 2 words: send help, send help. I'm in over my head here. So there's an emergency prayer section. And then the last prayer, when no words will come. So this is a section on, and I know you've been here, Mike, maybe in your shower, when all that will come is the heavy crying. It's that thing where I feel like I'm being split open. And so this is that time when I need to go into the abyss, because or maybe I don't need to go, but I am there. So I give this section right here, steps to navigate the abyss when you find it, because this is a real place in life that if you didn't know, yay for you, but it's miserable. And then I like at the bottom, did it help? Yes, no, question mark, check the box. Because if it didn't, we need to find what will. Let's keep going, right? There could be more here. So yes, those were the journey of the 5 prayers, and I needed to break free from people pleasing. So yay us.
Yay us. Well, I think that's a great one to end on, Cindy. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to let me re-uncork your story. Because and we can uncork it again. I'm sure we'll uncork it again. You're such a fantastic guest, and I always learn so much from you whenever we speak.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Now, does anybody have questions, or are we good?
We have somebody saying, amazing, thank you, Cindy, and that is coming from Jordan. And we'll leave it open here for another minute or so. If anybody has any last minute questions to put in the Q&A, happy to address them with our guest, Cindy Finch. We have hearts coming up. I always love to see the hearts come up. That
love the hearts.
Makes me feel happy. A lot of hearts coming up when you were sharing your story. Tori is asking, where can I find the workbook? Let's remind everybody where they can find the workbook, Cindy.
CindyFinch.com or on Amazon.
And if they want a signed copy?
If they want a signed copy, reach out to me, info@Cindy Finch, and I will hook them up.
There we go. Get the old hookup.
Yeah. It's good to see everybody today.
Yeah, it was nice to have you here. And again, we will also put this over Uncorking a Story on YouTube and through all podcast platforms, so people can listen at their leisure. And I see people are taking off. It is dinner time here on the East Coast.
Gotta go.
So I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys today.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.